The stars had always been quiet. For thousands of years, humanity looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They dreamed of the day when they would finally meet another intelligent species. That day came on a Tuesday morning in April. It was not what anyone had hoped, for the Velrath Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered 600 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way. Their empire stretched across distances that human minds could barely understand. Their ships moved faster than light. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their armies numbered in the trillions. High Sovereign Kale Thor the Unbroken sat on a throne made from the bones of defeated kings. He had earned his title through 500 years of war. No enemy had ever made him retreat. No rebellion had ever succeeded against him. The galaxy knew his name and trembled when his scout ships discovered Earth. Calathor barely looked up from his evening meal. Another primitive world, his advisor told him. One planet no faster than light capability. Their largest ships are laughable, my sovereign. They cannot even leave their own star system. Calathor waved a clawed hand. Send Overlord Cirx. Tell him to bring them into the fold. Standard integration. The advisor bowed low. At once, my sovereign. Standard integration was a simple process. The Velrath had done it hundreds of times. They would arrive with overwhelming force. They would demand surrender. The primitive species would see that resistance was impossible. They would bow. They would serve. Their world would become another jewel in the Dominion's crown. It had never failed. Overlord Cirque was a young commander eager to prove himself. He was given 40 warships for the mission. It was more than enough. Most species surrendered after seeing just 5th cruisers. 40 was almost insulting. It suggested that the High Sovereign considered Earth barely worth the effort. Cirque did not mind. An easy victory was still a victory. It would look good on his record. His fleet traveled through the void between stars. They moved at speeds that bent the laws of physics. What would have taken human ships thousands of years took the Velrath only 6 days. When they arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, Cirque studied the human defenses with amusement. 63 ships, that was all. 63 vessels that could not even travel faster than light. They were clustered around the 3rd planet from the sun, orbiting like frightened animals, huddling together for warmth. Scan them, Cirque ordered. His sensor officer obeyed. The results came back quickly. Primitive metal alloys. Overlord chemical propulsion systems. Their weapons appear to be projectile-based and some form of directed energy, but weak, very weak. Cirque laughed. Several of his officers joined him. They fight with bullets and flashlights. One of them joked, my personal shuttle has better weapons. This will be over before lunch. Another said. Cirque nodded in agreement. He opened a communication channel to Earth. His message would be broadcast on every frequency impossible to ignore. Every human on the planet would hear his words. Attention, inhabitants of the 3rd planet, he began. His voice was calm, almost bored. I am Overlord Cirque of the Velrath Dominion. Your world has been selected for integration into our great empire. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is your reality. He paused for effect. On the view screen, The blue planet hung in space. It was pretty, he admitted. The Dominion would make good use of it. You have to. Standard hours to surrender, Cirque. Continued, you will disable your weapons, you will lower your defenses. Your leaders will present themselves to me for processing. Your population will be assigned roles within the Dominion based on their usefulness, resist, and your cities will burn, your species will be reduced to a fraction of its current number. The survivors will still serve us, but they will serve as slaves rather than citizens. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Your fleet numbers 63 vessels, mine numbers 40. Each of my ships can destroy entire continents. The mathematics are simple. You cannot win. Choose wisely. You have 2 hours. Message ends. He cut the transmission and leaned back in his command chair. Now we wait. Someone bring me a drink. On Earth, the message played on every screen, every radio, every device capable of receiving a signal. In homes and offices, in schools and hospitals, in military bases and government buildings, people stopped what they were doing and listened. They heard the alien voice. They understood the threat. For a moment, the entire planet was silent. Then the United Terran Defense Council convened. They met in a bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland. Generals and admirals from every nation sat around a massive table. Screens on the walls showed the alien fleet still holding position at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Chen Wein was the first to speak. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many wars. She had commanded human forces for 3 decades. She had never lost a battle. They made a mistake, she said quietly. The others looked at her. They broadcast their exact position, Chen continued. They told us how many ships they have. They told us their assessment of our capabilities. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. They think they're giving us a deadline. They are giving us time to aim. General Yuki Tanaka of the Japanese Defense Force nodded slowly. Our weapons are hot. They have been hot for 200 years. We have been waiting for this day. The orbital platforms are ready, reported Admiral Jackson of the American fleet. 12,000 missiles, 800 railgun batteries, 240 X-ray laser arrays. The submarines are in position, added Admiral Vyulov of the Russian Navy. Another 4,000 missiles ready to launch. On command, every ship in the fleet has targeting solutions locked, said Admiral Chen. We knew the aliens would come someday. We just did not know when. The alien overlord had made an assumption. He had assumed that humanity was primitive because they did not have faster than light travel. He had assumed that their ships were weak because they were slow. He was wrong. Humanity had never developed FTL drives, not because they could not. They had chosen not to. Every gram of metal, every hour of research, every credit of funding that could have gone toward exploring the stars had instead been poured into something else. Weapons. Humans had spent 10,000 years fighting each other. They had invented swords and spears, guns and bombs, missiles and lasers. Each war taught them new ways to kill. Each peace gave them time to prepare for the next war. When they finally looked up at the stars and wondered what might be out there, they did not see opportunity. They saw threat. They saw danger. They saw enemies they had not yet met, so they prepared. The orbital defense platforms were not scientific stations, as the alien scan suggested. They were weapons platforms armed with enough firepower to crack moons, submarines beneath Earth's oceans, carried missiles tipped with warheads that could vaporize cities. The primitive ships in Earth's fleet were not exploration vessels, they were battleships armed with rail guns that could fire tungsten rods at 3% the speed of light. Humanity had been waiting for this moment for 200 years. The Defense Council voted. It was unanimous. Admiral Chen stood and looked at the faces around the table. These were the leaders of humanity. In their hands rested the fate of their entire species. We did not start this, she said, but we will finish it. All stations, all ships, all platforms, weapons free, fire at will. Across the planet, the message went out. In orbital stations and submarine bays, in missile silos and ship bridges, soldiers received their orders. They did not hesitate. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Captain Maria Santos sat in the command chair of the submarine Leviathan. She had served for 20 years, waiting for a war that she hoped would never come. Now it was here. Orders received. Her communications officer reported, weapons free. Santos looked at her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes, but they were also ready. You heard the order, she said calmly. Launch all missiles. Let's show these aliens what humanity is made of. In orbit around Earth, Commander James Wright stood on the bridge of the defense platform Aegis 7. Through the view screen, he could see the distant lights of the alien fleet. Targeting solutions confirmed. His weapons officer said all systems green. He thought about his wife, his children, his home. In Colorado, he thought about everyone on the planet below. Fire, he said, and across the Earth, from every ship and station and platform, humanity answered the alien ultimatum, not with words, not with surrender, but with fire. The Velrath had conquered 600 worlds. They had a method. It worked every time. First, they would arrive with a show of force. Their ships were massive, beautiful in a deadly way, covered smooth armor that glowed with energy. Shield, they would position themselves in orbit and broadcast their demands. Then they would wait. Every species they had encountered reacted the same way. First came denial, then came fear, then came desperate attempts to negotiate, and finally always came surrender. The Velrath had evolved on a garden world called Velrath Prime. It was a peaceful planet full of gentle prey animals and soft forests. They became the apex predators, not through struggle, but through simple dominance. Nothing on their world could challenge them. When they reached the stars and met other species, those species could not challenge them either. They had never learned what it meant to truly fight for survival. Humanity had learned that lesson 1,000,000 times over. On Earth, the history of warfare stretched back to the very beginning. When the first humans climbed down from the trees, they found a world that wanted to kill them. Predators with sharp teeth, weather that could freeze or burn, diseases that could wipe out entire tribes. Other humans who wanted what they had. Survival was never guaranteed. It had to be earned. It had to be fought for. And humans were very, very good at fighting. The first weapons were rocks and sticks. Then came spears, then bows, then swords. Each generation invented new ways to kill, new ways to protect themselves, new ways to destroy their enemies. Gunpowder changed everything. Suddenly, a single soldier could kill from a distance. The death tolls rose. But humanity did not stop. They never stopped. They built cannons and rifles. They built machine guns and tanks. They built bombs that could flatten cities, and missiles that could cross continents. In minutes, they split the atom and created weapons that could end all life on Earth, and still they kept building. When humanity finally looked up at the stars, they did not see friends waiting to meet them. They saw the same thing they had always seen: potential enemies, unknown threats, dangers that had to be prepared for. The world governments came together in secret for the first time in history. Every nation agreed on something. They would prepare for the arrival of alien life. They would assume the worst. They would build weapons unlike anything the world had ever seen. The project was called Prometheus, named after the Greek god who brought fire to humanity. It lasted for 200 years. The greatest minds of every generation worked on it, and when Overlord Cirque arrived with his 40 ships, he had no idea what was waiting for him. Admiral Chen Lin knew she had trained her entire life for this moment. In the command center beneath the Swiss mountains, she watched the tactical displays. Every weapon in humanity's arsenal was shown as a glowing dot on the screen. There were thousands of them. "Show me the orbital platforms," she ordered. The display shifted. 12 massive stations hung in orbit around Earth. 2 alien sensors. They looked like research facilities, harmless, primitive. The Velreth scans had dismissed them as unimportant. Each station carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The rail guns were the pride of human engineering. They used electromagnetic fields to accelerate tungsten rods to incredible speeds. Each rod was the size of a telephone pole and weighed several tons. When fired, they traveled at 9,000 km/s, 3% of the speed of light. At that speed, the rods did not need explosive warheads. The kinetic energy alone was enough. When a Raylan slug hit a target, it released more energy than a nuclear bomb, and the orbital platforms had 800 of them. "Show me the missile systems," Chen said. The display changed again. Across 6 continents, hidden in mountains and deserts and frozen wastelands, missile silos waited. Beneath the oceans, submarines drifted in silence, their launch tubes loaded and ready. 12,000 missiles in total. Each one carried a warhead designed specifically for space combat. Some were nuclear, some were anti-air, some carried experimental weapons that had never been tested in actual battle. Velreth had good point defense systems. They could shoot down missiles, deflect energy beams, absorb impacts. They had conquered 600 worlds with those defenses, but they had never faced 12,000 missiles at once. "Show me the laser arrays," Chen ordered. The final piece of humanity's defense appeared on the screen. 240 orbital weapons platforms, each carrying a nuclear X-ray laser. These weapons use small nuclear explosions to generate beams of focused radiation. Each beam lasted only a fraction of a second, but in that fraction of a second it could cut through anything. The Velreth shields were designed to absorb energy and spread it across their surface. They were good at handling sustained attacks. They were not designed for 240 simultaneous strikes, each delivering its full power in a single instant. General Tanaka studied the tactical display. "Our targeting solutions are locked. We know exactly where each of their ships is. We know their speed. They're heading there." Formation, they are holding position. Reported a sensor officer, they expect us to surrender, they are not even at battle stations. Admiral Chen nodded. Slowly, this was what she had hoped for. The aliens were confident. Overconfident, they had no idea what was coming. What about our fleet? She asked. All 63 ships report ready, said Admiral Jackson. They are in defensive formation around Earth, but their weapons are aimed at the alien fleet. Every ship has multiple targets locked. The human ships were not large by galactic standards. They could not travel faster than light. Their engines were slow, their range was limited, but they were not built for exploration or travel. They were built for one purpose only: to kill. Each ship carried railguns, missile tubes, and point defense systems. Their armor was thick, layered with materials designed to absorb and deflect energy weapons. Their crews had trained for years, running simulation after simulation, preparing for the day when aliens would arrive. That day was here. Admiral Chen looked at the countdown timer. The aliens had given humanity 2 hours. Only 12 minutes had passed since the ultimatum was delivered. We do not need 2 hours, she said quietly. General Tanaka stood beside her. The doctrine is clear, overwhelming response. We hit them with everything at once. We do not give them time to react. We do not give them time to adapt. We do not give them time to call for help. Shin nodded. One chance, one strike, total destruction. This was the core of human military thinking. Throughout their history, humans had learned that hesitation meant death. When faced with a threat, you did not negotiate. You did not warn. You did not give your enemy time to prepare. You struck first. You struck hard. You struck with everything you had. All stations report ready, the communications officer announced. Waiting for your order, Admiral. Shen looked at the faces around her. These were the leaders of humanity, generals and admirals from every nation. They had put aside their differences, their old conflicts, their political disagreements. In this moment they were united. They were human, and humans did not surrender. The order has been given, Chen said. Weapons free. All stations fire at will. Across the planet, the message spread at the speed of light. In orbital platforms and missile silos, in submarines and battleships, soldiers received the command. The first missiles launched from the submarines. They rose from the ocean depths, breaking the surface in great columns of spray and fire. Within seconds, hundreds of them were climbing toward space, their engines burning bright against the blue sky. In orbit, the defense platforms came alive. Rail guns charged with electromagnetic energy. Targeting computers made their final calculations, and then with a series of sounds that no one on Earth could hear, the first tungsten rods were fired on the ships of the human fleet. Captains gave the order to fire. Missiles burst from launch tubes. Rail guns hurled their deadly projectiles into the void. Energy weapons powered up and released their beams. Everything happened at once. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. Give the enemy no time to react. Give them no chance to adapt. Overwhelm them with sheer volume of fire. The Velreth had never faced anything like it. No species they had conquered had ever fought back with such ferocity. The few that resisted did so weakly, hopelessly. Knowing they could not win, humanity did not fight like that. Humanity fought to Win, and if they could not win, they would make sure their enemy paid. Terrible price. In the command center, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display. Thousands of weapons were now racing toward the alien fleet. Missiles, railgun slugs, laser beams, all converging on the same 40 targets. Time to impact, she asked. 7 minutes 12 seconds, the tactical officer replied. Chen nodded. 7 minutes. In 7 minutes they would know if humanity would survive or fall. She thought about her children, her grandchildren, everyone on the planet below. 8 billion lives, all depending on what happened in the next 7 minutes. May God have mercy on us, she whispered, because we will show none to them. The weapons flew through space, silent and deadly, carrying the fury of a species that had never learned how to surrender. Over. Cirque was bored. He sat in his command chair on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the flagship of his fleet. Around him, his officers went about their duties with casual ease. Some were playing games on their personal devices. Others were discussing what they would do with their share of the human slaves. This was supposed to be an easy mission, a simple conquest of a primitive world. Sir had done this dozens of times before. The pattern was always the same. He would deliver the ultimatum. The natives would panic. They would argue among themselves. Eventually their leaders would come crawling to him, begging for mercy. He expected the humans to be no different. How much time remains? He asked lazily. 1 hour and 43 minutes, Overlord, his aide replied. Sir. Yawned. Wake me when they respond. I expect their surrender will be amusing. He closed his eyes and settled deeper into his chair. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Outside, the stars glittered in the eternal darkness of space. The small blue planet called Earth hung in the distance, peaceful and unaware of its fate. Then his sensor officer screamed. Sir's eyes snapped open. He had never heard that sound before. Pure terror from a trained military officer. What is it? He demanded. The sensor officer was staring at his display. His scales had gone pale. His claws were trembling. Overlord, they fired. What? The humans? They fired all of them. Everything. Sir jumped to his feet and looked at the main tactical display. For a moment his mind could not process what he was seeing. Thousands of objects were racing toward his fleet. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Missiles, projectiles, energy signatures, all converging on his position. The display was filled with red warning icons, so many that they blurred together into a solid wall of incoming death. That is impossible, he whispered. But it was not impossible. It was happening. Shields, he shouted. Ray. All shields, point defense activate. All ships, battle stations. The alarms began to wail. Officers who had been relaxing moments before now scrambled to their positions. The bridge erupted into chaos. Overlord, the volume of fire is beyond anything in our records, the tactical officer reported. His voice was shaking. Our point defense systems are designed to handle dozens of simultaneous targets. There are thousands of incoming projectiles. Then prioritize, Cirque commanded. Focus on the largest threats. Shoot down what you can. We are trying, Overlord, but the targeting computers cannot keep up. There are too many. There are simply too many. The first wave of missiles entered Paul defense range. Wrath ships opened fire, their energy weapons flashing as They tried to intercept the incoming threats. They hit some dozens of missiles exploded in silent bursts of light. But for every missile they destroyed, 10 more kept coming. The rail gun slugs arrived first. They were traveling so fast that the Velreth sensors barely had time to register them. Before impact, the cruiser voice of Dominion was hit by 6 tungsten rods. The space of 2 seconds, each rod weighed several tons and was traveling at 9,000 km/s. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to multiple nuclear bombs detonating simultaneously. The ship did not explode, it disintegrated. One moment it was there, a proud warship of the Velreth fleet. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and shattered metal. Voice of Dominion is gone, someone shouted. Claw of Empire reports critical damage. Sovereign's will is not responding. Syrax watched in horror as his fleet began to die. The railgun slugs punched through shields and armor like needles. Through paper, they hit with such force that entire sections of ships simply ceased to exist. Then the missiles arrived. The Velreth point defense systems were overwhelmed. They had been designed to handle the polite, ordered warfare of the galaxy, enemies who attacked in measured waves, who valued their own ships too much to sacrifice them in mass assaults. They were not designed for this. The humans had not sent a measured response. They had sent everything, every missile, every weapon, every ounce of destructive power they possessed. They were not trying to defeat the Velreth fleet. They were trying to erase it from existence. Missiles slammed into Velreth ships by the dozens. Nuclear warheads detonated against shields, overloading them with raw energy. Antimatter warheads burned through armor like acid through flesh. Ships that had survived the rail gun barrage were torn apart by the missile swarm. Eternal flame destroyed. Conqueror's pride destroyed. Storm of destroyed. The reports came so fast that Cirque could not keep track. His fleet of 40 warships was being annihilated before his eyes. Return fire, he screamed. Target their ships, their platforms. Anything. We are trying, Overlord, but their projectiles are disrupting our targeting systems. We cannot get a clear lock. Then the X-ray lasers fired. 240 orbital platforms released their beams simultaneously. Each beam lasted only a fraction of a second, but in that fraction of a second, it delivered more energy than a star's surface. The beam struck ships that had somehow survived the rail guns and missiles. They cut through shields like they were not there. They sliced through armor, through bulkheads, through everything in their path. The destroyer fist of Empire was hit by 3 beams at once. It was cut into 4 pieces, each piece spinning away into the void. The battle cruiser Dominion's Wrath took a beam through its engineering section. The ship's reactor went critical and exploded, taking 2 nearby vessels with it. Cirque staggered as his own ship shook. From a nearby explosion, warning lights flashed across the bridge. Damn it. Reports flooded in from every section. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Main reactor is failing. Shields are gone. Of his 40 ships, only 8 were still showing as active, and even as he watched, another icon flickered and went dark. This is impossible, he said again. But his voice was weak now. All the arrogance gone. We are the Velreth. We are the masters of the galaxy. We do not lose to primitives. But they were losing. They were dying. And there was nothing he could do to Stop it, a railgun slug struck the Eternal Dominion, the impact threw Cirque. Across the bridge, he hit the far wall and felt bones break. Alarms screamed. Smoke filled the air. Around him, his officers lay dead or dying. He tried to stand, but his legs would not obey. He looked up at the view screen, still somehow functioning despite the damage. He could see Earth, that small blue planet, that world of primitives. Who should have surrendered? Who should have knelt? How? He whispered, how did they do this? Another impact rocked the ship. The ceiling cracked, metal groaned and tore. In his final moments, Cirque understood his mistake. He had looked at humanity and seen a primitive species without faster than light travel. He had assumed that meant they were weak, harmless, easy to conquer. He had not understood what he was truly facing, a species that had spent 10,000 years fighting for survival, a species that had turned warfare into an art form, a species that did not know how to surrender because surrendering meant death. The humans had not developed FTL drives because they did not need them. They had stayed on their single world and built weapons instead. They had prepared for this day, for the arrival of alien conquerors for centuries, and when the conquerors came, humanity was ready. A tungsten rod traveling at 3%. The speed of light punched through the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Over. Cirque had no time to scream. One moment he was there, the next moment he was. Atoms scattered across the void. Battle lasted 7 minutes and 23 seconds. In that time, 40th warships, each capable of destroying continents, were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Every single vessel was destroyed. There were no survivors, no escape pods launched, no distress signals sent. The humans did not take prisoners. They did not accept surrender. They simply destroyed everything in front of them. When the last Velrith ship died, the human fleet held its position. For a long moment nothing moved. The debris fields expanded slowly, cooling from white-hot to dull red to the black of cold metal. In the command center, beneath the Swiss mountains, Admiral Chen Lin stared at the tactical display. Where 40 red icons had been, there was now only empty space. Confirm kills, she ordered. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. All 40 enemy vessels destroyed, no remaining threats detected. The room was silent. Then slowly someone began to clap. Others joined in. Within seconds the entire command center erupted in cheers. But Admiral Chen did not celebrate. She was thinking about what came next. The Wrath had sent 40 ships. They would have more. Many more. An empire that spanned 600 worlds would not ignore the destruction of an entire fleet. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Get me a damage report, she said quietly. How many missiles do we have left? How many rail gun rounds? What is the status of our ships? The celebration died down. Officers returned to their stations. All ships report minimal damage. The enemy did not return effective fire. We use approximately 60% of our orbital missile stockpile, another 40% of our submarine launched missiles, railgun batteries. Report 70% ammunition remaining. Casualties. The officer paused, checking his display twice. 0 Admiral, 0 casualties. Chen closed her eyes. 0 casualties. They had destroyed an alien fleet and lost nothing. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a miracle, but she knew it was not a miracle. It was preparation. 200 years of preparation. Begin reloading all platforms, she ordered. Recall our ships for resupply. I want us back at full capacity within 72 hours. Yes, Admiral, she looked at the view screen at the stars beyond. Earth's atmosphere, somewhere out there. An empire was about to learn what had happened to their fleet, and they would come. They would come with more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. They would come for revenge. The throne room of the Velra Dominion was vast. It could hold 10,000 people. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. The walls were covered in the banners of conquered worlds, 600 flags, representing 600 victories. High Sovereign Caliph Thor the Unbroken sat on his throne and waited. 3 days had passed since Overlord Cirque was supposed to report the successful conquest of Earth. 3 days of silence, no transmissions, no updates, nothing. At first, Calathur had not been concerned. Sometimes communications were delayed. Sometimes young commanders forgot to report in, too busy enjoying their victory. He had been annoyed but not worried. Then the sensor logs arrived. Sir's fleet had been equipped with automated recording systems. These systems constantly documented everything that happened around the ships. When a ship was destroyed, the recordings were automatically transmitted to the nearest Dominion outpost, all 40 ships, and sent there. Final recordings at almost the same time. The outpost had compiled them and forwarded them to Velreth Prime, Caliph. Thor watched the footage in his private chambers first. He watched it 3 times, convinced that there had been some mistake, some trick, some explanation that made sense. There was no explanation that made sense. The primitives, the humans as they called themselves, had destroyed an entire Velreth fleet in less than 8 minutes. They had fired thousands of weapons simultaneously. They had overwhelmed point defense systems that had never been overwhelmed before. They had killed every single soldier without losing a single ship of their own. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. Now Calathur sat on his throne, surrounded by his advisors and generals. The footage played on a massive screen for all of them to see. Some had already fled the room, unable to watch their ships die over and over. Others stood frozen, their scales pale, their eyes wide with shock. Play it again, Calathur commanded. My sovereign one advisor said carefully. We have played it 15 times. The result does not change. I know the result does not change. High Sovereign's voice echoed through the vast chamber. I want to understand. I want to know how this happened, how a species without faster than light travel destroyed 40 warships in 7 minutes. No one had an answer. Strategic advisor Telra stepped forward. He was old even by Velreth standards and had served 3 high sovereigns. His voice was calm despite the chaos around him. My sovereign, the answer is visible in the footage. The humans did not fight as other species fight. They did not send warnings. They did not negotiate. They did not test our defenses or probe for weaknesses. They simply fired everything. They hit all at once. That is not how warfare works. A general protested. No species waste as resources like that. You engage the enemy, assess their capabilities, adjust your tactics. The humans did not waste resources, Telra interrupted. They used exactly as many resources as necessary to guarantee victory. They calculated that our fleet could be destroyed by a simultaneous strike of sufficient magnitude. They had that magnitude available, so they used it. Thor stared at the frozen image. On the screen, it showed the moment before impact. Thousands of projectiles converging on his fleet like a swarm of angry insects. They were prepared for us, he said slowly. They'd built those weapons knowing we would come. Yes, my sovereign, how? They have never met another species. They had no reason to expect us. Telra hesitated. The recordings captured some of their communications. Our translation systems have analyzed them. The humans, they have a long history of warfare, my sovereign, against each other. Thor turned to stare at his advisor. What? They fought each other for thousands of years, wars that killed millions of their own kind. They developed these weapons not for alien threats but for use against themselves. The throne room was silent. The Vel could not comprehend this. They had evolved as apex predators united under a single leadership for their entire history. The idea of fighting your own species was alien to them. Insane. They are monsters, someone whispered. They are survivors, Telra corrected. They survived by being the most dangerous creatures on their world. Then they looked at the stars and assumed that whatever was out there would be just as dangerous as they were. For 200 years they prepared. Thor sat in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice heavy. What do we do? Now they have destroyed one fleet. We have many more. Do we send another larger one? The generals exchanged glances. Finally, Fleet Master Vorax spoke. My sovereign, if we send another fleet, the humans will destroy it too. Their weapons are not depleted. Our analysis of the battle shows they used only a fraction of their available firepower. They have more missiles, more rail guns, more of those death beams. Then we send 100 ships, 200, enough to overwhelm even their defenses. Vorax shook his head slowly. My sovereign, I have run the calculations. To guarantee victory against the human defenses, we would need to commit nearly half of our entire military. Catastrophic. What are you saying? I am saying that the cost of conquering Earth would be the destruction of our empire while our fleets are busy dying above that planet. The conquered worlds will see that we are weak. They will rebel. They will fight. By the time we defeat the humans, if we defeat them, we will have nothing left to rule. Thor gripped the arms of his throne so hard that the ancient bone cracked. Then, what do you suggest? That we simply forget this insult, that we let the death of 40 ships go unavenged? Before anyone could answer, a communications officer rushed into the throne room. He was breathing hard, his scales flushed with exertion. My sovereign, we have received a transmission from Earth, from the humans. The room went still. Play it, Calathor commanded. The officer connected his device to the main screen. The image of the destroyed fleet was replaced by something else. A human female appeared on the screen. She had gray fur on her head. No, not fur, hair. The Wrath reminded themselves. Her eyes were dark and steady. She wore a uniform covered in medals and ribbons. Behind her, a blue flag with stars hung on the wall. She began to speak. Translation system converted her words into Velrath language. To the Velrath Dominion, I am Admiral Chenny Lin of the United Terran Defense Command. Your fleet has been destroyed. All 40 of your ships are gone. your soldiers are dead. Not one of them survived. She paused and a small smile crossed her face. You gave us 2 hours to surrender. We needed 7 minutes to end your threat. You sent 40 ships against us. We have 6,000 missiles still in reserve, waiting for your next fleet. We have rail guns that can fire for another 100 years. We have weapons you have not seen yet. Weapons we hope we never have to use. The smile faded, replaced by cold determination. Let me be clear about something. We did not ask for this war. We did not seek you out. We did not want to kill your soldiers. You came to our home. You threatened our families. You demanded that we surrender our freedom, our lives, our future. You gave us no choice. She leaned forward slightly. So, understand this. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. We do not submit. Where we come from, we have a saying. Perhaps your translators can explain it to you. The saying is, fuck around and find out. You and NBSP around you found out. Several Velrath in the throne room made sounds of confusion. The translator had rendered the human phrase directly, and its crude simplicity was shocking. Admiral Chen continued, we are sending you complete recordings of the battle. Every angle, every impact, every death. We have added helpful notes explaining exactly what went wrong for your forces. Consider it a gift. Learn from it. We are also sending you our terms, not for surrender. We will never accept your surrender, but for peace. We are willing to talk. We are willing to trade. We are willing to be your partners, your allies, your friends, but we will never be your slaves. She straightened in her chair. Send diplomats and we will welcome them. Send warships and we will destroy them. The choice is yours. Admiral Chen Lin, United Terran Defense Command. Message ends. The screen went dark. The throne room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what they had just witnessed pressed down on all of them. Finally, Kale Thor spoke. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. They mocked us. They killed our soldiers. And then they mocked us, my sovereign. Telra began. Silence. Calathor stood slowly. He was old, older than any living, except a few advisors. He had ruled for 500 years. He had never known defeat. He had never known humiliation. Until now, he walked to the great window that overlooked the capital city. Millions of Velrath lived below, going about their daily lives, unaware of the disaster that had befallen their empire. We have 2 choices, he said, not turning around. We can send more fleets. We can throw our military at this planet until either they break or we do. We can avenge our dead even if it costs us everything. He paused. Or we can do what they suggest. We can send diplomats. We can accept that there is one world in the galaxy that we cannot conquer. We can swallow our pride and treat them as equals. The generals and advisors waited. No one dared to speak. Calathor turned to face them. His eyes were old and tired. I have ruled for 500 years. He said, I have sent millions to their deaths. I have conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. I have done terrible things. In the name of the Dominion, he walked slowly back to his throne. But I am not a fool. I know when I am beaten. Send the diplomats. Open negotiations and pray to whatever gods you believe in that the humans are as willing to make peace as they claim to be. He sat down heavily, because if they are not, then the Velrath Dominion has already fallen. We just do not know it. Yet the news spread across the galaxy. Like fire, it started in the conquered worlds closest to Velreth Prime. Whisper here, a rumor there, someone's cousin worked in the communication center, someone's brother served in the military. Secrets have a way of escaping, especially secrets this big. Within a month, every intelligent species in the Dominion had heard the story. The mighty Velreth, rulers of 600 worlds, had been defeated, not by great empire, not by a coalition of species, but by a single planet of primitives who could not even travel faster than light. 40 warships, 7 minutes, total destruction. The recordings were copied and shared in secret. People watched them in hidden rooms on smuggled devices in the dark of night. When Velreth overseers were not watching, they saw the impossible happen. They saw hope. On the planet Kyrath 4, a rebellion began. The native Kyrathians had served the Dominion for 3,000 years. They had forgotten what freedom felt like, but watching the human battle changed something inside them. If the humans could fight back, so could they. The rebellion was small at first, a refused order here, a sabotage supply line there, but it grew, and when the Velra said soldiers to crush it, the Chayathians fought back with a ferocity they had not shown in millennia. On the ocean world of Primus, the aquatic Pymes stopped delivering their monthly tribute of rare minerals. When the Velreth demanded payment, the PMY leaders simply responded with a single word: no. On the desert planet of Sandor 4, the reptilian Sandari people began to arm themselves. They built weapons in secret factories. They trained in hidden valleys. They waited for the right moment. One by one, across 600 worlds, the conquered species began to stir. They had been told their whole lives that the Velreth were invincible, that resistance was futile, that obedience was the only path to survival. The humans had proven that was a lie. On Velreth Prime, High Sovereign Calathar watched his empire begin to crumble. Rebellion reports came in daily. Worlds that had been loyal for centuries were suddenly defiant. His generals demanded more soldiers, more ships, more resources to crush the uprisings, but there were not enough soldiers, not enough ships. The military had been built to maintain order, not to fight wars on 600 fronts simultaneously. The other officers saw what was happening. They saw the Kale Thor's stubbornness, his arrogance, his decision to attack Earth had doomed them all. If he had left the humans alone, none of this would have happened. The Empire would have continued as it always had. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Calathar the Unbroken was removed from power. His own generals arrested him in his throne room. He seemed almost relieved. The new government, led by a council of pragmatic military leaders, immediately sent a message to Earth. They requested negotiations. They offered peace. The humans accepted. Admiral Chen Lin traveled to a neutral location at the edge of human space. She brought a small delegation of diplomats and advisors. She also brought, just in case, 5 heavily armed warships that stayed within weapons range the entire time. The Velreth delegation was led by strategic advisor Telra, now one of the leaders of the new government. He arrived with his own ships, but made sure to keep them at a respectful distance from the human vessels. The two species met face to face for the first time, not as conqueror and conquered, not as master and slave, but as equals. Telra studied the human female across the negotiating table. She was smaller, than he had expected, softer looking. If he had seen her on any conquered world, he would have dismissed her as weak, helpless, easily controlled. He had watched the battle recordings 100 times. He knew better now. Admiral Chen, he said, his translator device rendering his words into her language. On behalf of the Velrath people, I wish to express regret for what happened, for what we tried to do. Chen's expression did not change. Your people tried to enslave us. Your commander threatened to burn our cities and reduce our population to a fraction. I appreciate the apology, but regret seems like a small word for what was attempted. It is. Telra lowered his head slightly. We have done terrible things to many species for thousands of years. We told ourselves it was necessary, that we were bringing order to the galaxy, that the conquered were better off under our rule. And now, I watch our empire collapse. I see worlds that have served us for millennia rise up in rebellion. I see everything we built being torn down. He paused. Perhaps we deserved it. Chen studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. Perhaps you did, but we are not here to punish you. We are here to talk about the future. The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. In the end, both sides got something they wanted. The Velrath agreed to recognize Earth as an independent world, free from any claim of conquest or integration. They agreed to share faster-than-light technology, allowing humans to finally travel among the stars. They agreed to trade, to cultural exchange, to mutual defense against common threats. In return, the humans agreed not to actively support the rebellions that were tearing the Dominion apart. They would not provide weapons or training to the conquered species. They would not interfere in internal Wrath affairs. It was a compromise. Neither side was fully happy, but both sides could live with it. The treaty was signed in Geneva on Earth, in the same chamber where countless human treaties had been signed over the centuries. Telra looked around at the ancient room, at the flags of human nations that hung on the walls, at the history that surrounded him. You have fought many wars, he observed, among yourselves. Yes, Chen replied, too many. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once, and yet you survived. We always survive. She poured 2 glasses of wine and offered one to the alien. That is what we do. We fight, we suffer, we learn, and we survive. Telra accepted the glass carefully, unsure of how to drink with his different mouth structure. May I ask you something? Something that has bothered me since I watched the battle recordings. Of course, how did you develop such violence, such capacity for destruction? No species in the galaxy fights like you do. Your weapons, your tactics, your willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, it is unlike anything we have ever encountered. Chen was silent for a moment. She looked out the window at the city beyond, at the people walking the streets, living their lives. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other, she said finally. Every war we got better at it, every peace we used to prepare for the next war, every atrocity taught us what we were capable of, every act of heroism taught us what we were fighting for. She turned back to face him. You looked at us and saw primitives. You saw that we did not have faster-than-light travel. You assumed that meant we were weak, harmless, easy to conquer. We were wrong. Yes, you were. She raised her glass. You should have looked closer. You would have seen a species that has never stopped preparing for the next War, a species that has always won that. Fights that mattered. A species that would rather die than. Neil, Telra raised his own glass. Awkwardly. What do you drink to among your people? He asked. Chen smiled. It was the first time Telra had seen her smile. It transformed her face, made her look almost gentle. We drink to many things, to health, to happiness, to victory. She paused, but today let us drink to something else. Let us drink to peace. And let us hope that neither of our peoples ever has to fight the other again. They drank. Outside the sun was setting. Over Geneva, the sky turned orange and red, painting the ancient city in colors of fire. Somewhere a child was laughing, a bird was singing, life was going on as it always did. The galaxy had changed forever. In the years that followed, humanity spread among the stars. They built colonies, they established trade routes, they made allies and occasionally enemies. They became one of the great powers of the galaxy, respected and feared in equal measure. The Thelrath dominion shrank. Many of the conquered worlds gained their independence. The empire that had once ruled 600 systems eventually controlled only a few dozen. But it survived, transformed into something smaller but perhaps more honest, and throughout the galaxy a new phrase became common. It was borrowed from human soldiers who had served on the orbital platforms during the battle. It became the first rule of galactic diplomacy, taught enemies and repeated council chambers across 1,000 worlds. Don't poke the humans. It was good advice. On Earth, the orbital defense platforms still hung in space, silent and watchful. The submarines still drifted through the dark oceans, their missile tubes loaded and ready. The railgun batteries still pointed at the stars. Humanity hoped they would never need to use those weapons again. They hoped that peace would last forever. They hoped that the galaxy had learned its lesson. But just in case, they kept preparing. That was what humans did. They prepared, they planned. They built weapons and trained soldiers, and waited for the next threat to arrive, because they knew better than anyone that peace was precious and temporary, that danger could come from anywhere at any time, that survival was never guaranteed. It had to be earned, and humanity had spent 10,000 years earning it. 100 years after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Chenny Lin passed away peacefully. In her sleep, she was 162 years old, kept alive by the medical technology that humans had developed after joining the galactic community. Her funeral was attended by representatives from 100 worlds. The Velrath sent a delegation. So did the Kyrathians, the Primi, the Sendori, and dozens of other species that had gained their freedom in the years following the battle. They came to honor the woman who had changed the galaxy. On her tombstone, at her own request, they carved a simple message. She gave them 2 hours. She needed 7 minutes. It was everyone agreed, the perfect ending to a perfect life. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity kept watch, ready for anything, prepared for everything, because that was what humans did, and they were very, very good at.